it's great to see everyone here. I'm Justin Smeltzer. I'm an electrician in Peoria and a rank and file member of UAW Local 974, and I'm a member of Workers Strike Back. Trump's attacks on working people and immigrants are some of the worst in decades. The White House has proudly claimed that Trump has already deported 139,000 people, and at least 121,000 federal workers have been fired or targeted for firing. Trump and his billionaire cabinet have attacked virtually every part of the working class and every oppressed group. Boo. He has particularly targeted immigrant and anti-war protesters, abducting them and trying to deport them. People like Mahmoud Khalil and Rumeysa Ozturk, people who have done nothing more than participate in helping to lead the fight against a horrific genocide in Gaza, a genocide which has been supported to the hilt by both warmongering parties of the billionaires, the Republicans and the Democrats. It's very important that hundreds of thousands of people are protesting around the country today against Trump's attacks because we urgently need a mass fight back. We should use these protests as a launch pad to escalate the movement. We can't wait for the Democratic Party to stop him. They have explicitly refused to fight Trump. Chuck Schumer decided to go on a book tour instead. A book tour he's now been forced to cancel because of the massive anger at him refusing to fight Trump, including calls for him to resign. Millions of working people have realized that neither of these parties represents them, neither gives a damn about workers or the oppressed. Over 60% of Americans believe that Trump and the Republicans and the Democrats are all out of touch with regular, ordinary people's lives. We need to exercise our own independent power as working people to stop these attacks.
Working and poor people are also facing vicious budget cuts from Democrats and Republicans in cities and states across the nation.
No cuts, no furloughs, strike, strike, strike!
Here in Rochester and in the state of Minnesota, we know that cuts are looming over us. My union, AFSCME Local 319, is rapidly mobilizing working people to the Rochester City Council meeting this coming Monday, May 5th at 6 p.m. to speak out against the cuts to crucial services and to demand that they tax the rich to fund all of our needs.
That's right!
My name is David Montequin. I am a member of AFSCME Local 319. It is utterly despicable that Democrats and Republicans on this city council are getting ready to carry out massive cuts to the library and other essential public services and layoffs and attacks on public sector workers. Instead of passing an austerity budget and putting the burden on working and poor people and on public sector unions and workers, the city council should be taxing the rich to fully fund our community's needs.
We know that cuts to public services and austerity budgets disproportionately fall on Black and brown people, immigrants, and trans people. We also know that the regressive increase in property taxes being proposed also negatively impacts working and middle-class families. As working people in Rochester, we reject all of this. The real answer to these budget crises is for working people to reject budget cuts and austerity, reject regressive taxation, and to fight to win taxes on the rich.
Some of these city council Democrats have said that the state law does not give them the right to tax the rich. This is nothing but an abdication of their duty as elected representatives, and it is unacceptable. If they had any actual commitment towards working and poor people, they would be joining us in demanding that the state legislature tax the rich to fully fund cities throughout the state. But none of this should be a surprise to working people. Whether in the city council or in the state legislature, both Democrats and Republicans are both parties that represent the rich, not working people. That's why I'm also a member of Workers Strike Back, a national organization fighting for universal public health care, a $25 an hour minimum wage, and good union jobs for all, and also calling for an end to all U.S. military funding to Israel.
What does Trump listen to? He listens to those things that damage his ability to rule. This is true of the billionaire class as a whole, and that's why the stock market crisis forced Trump to back down on part of his so-called Liberation Day tariffs. Working people need to disrupt the Trump administration and the political establishment. We need to carry out mass strike action and mass civil disobedience. These are the types of things that have a real power to stop Trump. and to bring him down altogether by shutting down the economy and the profits of the billionaires and their system. We need mass strike action, and we need to use them to build toward a general strike. Today is International Workers' Day, an appropriate day to discuss strike action, which is the most powerful tool that we have. The history of International Workers' Day was built around the struggle for working people to gain an 8-hour day of sick leave, Social Security, and Medicare. But none of these things would have ever been won if workers had relied on either of the two parties. They were won by militant, independent, working-class movements, many of them led by socialists, in defiance of both the Democrats and the Republicans. Today should have included mass strikes alongside these mass protests. Much reason it didn't is because so much of the labor leadership is trying to work with Trump instead of fighting against him. UAW President Shawn Fain even published an editorial to this effect entitled, "I'm president of UAW and I'm ready to work with Trump." Well, I'm a rank and file member of UAW and I'm sure as hell not ready to work with Trump. And it's not just Fain. It's Teamsters President Sean O'Brien, who shamefully spoke at the Republican National Convention, and this is the rotten approach of much of the labor leadership today. They do this because they have abandoned the militant class struggle methods that built the labor movement in favor of something called business unionism. They think that their job is to negotiate with the bosses or to negotiate with the two rotten parties. But this is utterly mistaken. In reality, workers have nothing in common with the bosses. This is the reason that they fight us tooth and nail against everything that we need, whether it's raises, safe working conditions, or benefits. That's because every dollar for us and our needs is one less dollar for their profits. That's capitalism. It's a zero-sum game, and it will take us all over the cliff of climate catastrophe if we let it. Capitalism cannot be reformed. Instead of fighting Trump, labor leaders like Fain and O'Brien are supporting Trump's tariffs, which are a disaster for working people. These tariffs are no more in the interests of working people than neoliberal free trade policy is. Both of these are tools of the bosses to try to maximize their profits. We need to build international solidarity to fight for workers everywhere and not allow ourselves to be pitted against each other. Instead of going along with attacks on Mexican workers, we need to act in solidarity for the rights of workers in Mexico and everywhere else to unionize their workplaces, to fight for good wages and safe working conditions. And we need to fight against the attempts at divide and rule attacks in the US as well. The bosses attack immigrant workers as part of an effort to divide us as workers, and because they use this to drive the wages down of all of us. The way to stop that is native-born and immigrant workers fighting together against the bosses and their two parties, and instead build a militant fight for our common interests. As working people, we produce everything. We make everything run. If we shut down the system of the bosses' profits and we carry out general strikes, we have the power to bring down Trump. But for any of that to happen, we need to build a rank-and-file rebellion inside our unions against business unionism and for a return to class struggle unionism. We need to build a mass movement of all workers wherever they are, whether they're in unions or not, alongside students, retirees, undocumented immigrants, everyone who wants to fight with us against the rich and their two parties. And that's why I'm a member of Workers Strike Back, which is a national organization fighting for a universal public health care, a $25 an hour minimum wage, and good union jobs for all. Workers Strike Back is also calling for an end to all U.S. military funding for Israel. Most importantly, Workers Strike Back members are putting forward a fighting strategy to win victories for working people. Unlike most of the labor leaders, Workers Strike Back is organizing working people into movements that are clear that the billionaires are not on our side, that we cannot, quote unquote, negotiate with them. This is exactly the fighting approach that was taken by socialist Shama Sawant, one of the founders of Workers Strike Back, who was a city council member in Seattle, Washington State. In her 10 years in office, Shama took home only the average worker's wage and donated the rest of her six-figure city council salary to support movements and strike funds.
Shama's office led the way to win the first ever major $15 an hour minimum wage, a wage that is now $20.76 an hour, the nation's highest.
Shama's office also won the historic Amazon tax on big business to fund affordable housing. But Shama did not win by trying to make deals with the Democrats. In fact, the Democratic Party politicians opposed every single one of these demands, despite the progressive rhetoric from some of them. Seattle's workers won because they understood they needed to fight back. So I think we need to start building that kind of fight back here in Rochester. And that starts on Monday night at the city council meeting to speak out against the cuts.
There's a growing anger at Trump's policies, and we see with the mass protests around the country today, and we can see it in the polls also. He's the most unpopular president at the 100-day point in his term. And we desperately need a new party for working people, beginning with organizing a powerful movement independent of both parties. In these same recent polls showing Trump's support collapsing, support for the Democrats are at historic lows. You can see the hunger for an alternative also in the town halls that have been happening around the country, where we've seen both Democrats and Republicans being shouted down.
No furloughs! Tax the rich!
And it's hardly surprising. Just days ago, both Democrats and Republicans on the Peoria City Council voted to approve a grocery tax, a deeply regressive tax that falls on working class people and poor people, disproportionately black families. Close to half of black families in Peoria are in need of food assistance, and 40% live at or below the poverty line. Already, Trump's tariffs are predicted to cost families an additional $3,800 on average this year, with some of the highest tariffs impacting food prices. I have a growing family with 2 small children, and some weeks we struggle to come up with money for basic groceries. I know I'm not alone in this, and there are hundreds of thousands of working families in this state who are struggling to get by. Over 130 people have emailed Mayor Ali and the city council here telling them not to pass the grocery tax and to tax the rich instead. This is a false choice. Taxing working and poor people or forcing us to accept cuts to essential services like ambulance and firefighting and environmental protection, working people like myself cannot afford either. This is completely manufactured narrative that does not consider a tax on the rich to fund the city's needs. And this is not by accident. This is because these establishment politicians on the city council are deeply hostile to working people, and they serve big business. Shame on Democratic Governor Pritzker and the state elected officials who are 2/3 Democrat, and on the Peoria City Council, who in this case has not even made an attempt to fight the Democrats' refusal to tax the rich. Illinois is home to some of the wealthiest people in the nation. 20 of the richest people in Illinois are billionaires, including Democratic Governor Pritzker and his family members. These rotten politicians did not even consider a tax on the rich instead.
What are the odds that even a democratically controlled General Assembly in Springfield would adopt a billionaire tax to cover this? Sadly, it ain't going to happen.
Tens of thousands of people are attending Bernie and AOC's self-stylized Fighting the Oligarchy tour because they want a fighting alternative. The problem is that these rallies don't offer one at all. What are they telling us in them? Vote blue again. We should remember that the mass May Day protests that began nearly 2 decades ago under a different president, George W. Bush, millions of immigrants and working people put their faith in Obama to go down a different road on the back of those protests, and angry at deportations, angry at the Iraq war, angry at Bush's anti-worker policies. What they got from Obama was a deporter-in-chief and an escalation of war in Afghanistan and a bailout of Wall Street instead of working people during the Great Recession. Trump's attacks on immigrants are horrific. What's striking, though, is that he still has a long way to go to beat Obama's record as a deporter-in-chief, Obama having deported over 400,000 people in 2012 alone. We need to abandon this failed strategy of looking to leaders in the Democratic Party. We need to fight for ourselves. We should not only fight to defend against attacks, but we also need to go on the offensive. My organization, Workers Strike Back, is helping to relaunch the fight for Medicare for All, and we're not going to win it by waiting around for Congress, because Democrats will never do it. We're building an independent fighting movement, and I hope you'll join us. You can sign our petition here today. We need to bring down Trump. The sooner, the better. But we also need to bring down the billionaires, both their parties, and the rotten system of capitalism. Solidarity.